Commander Jinwoo Park pressed his palm against the cold metal of the observation window. The stars looked different out here, farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled. Behind him, the bridge of the research vessel New Soul hummed, with quiet activity. 3 months of jumping from system to system, and still they had found nothing alive. "Contact ahead," called Navigator Minji Kim, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "Big structures, Captain, really big." Jinwoo walked over to look at her screen. The display showed massive shapes floating in the darkness around a yellow star. They were clearly made by someone, not natural formations. Curved metal arms stretched for kilometers. Crystal towers caught starlight and split it into rainbow patterns. Energy collectors bigger than Earth's moon hung motionless in perfect formation. "Any signals?" Jinwoo asked. "Nothing, sir. Just like the others." Chief Science Officer Hunwoo Lee shook his head as more data flowed in. 7 systems now. 7 different civilizations, by the look of it. All with technology that makes ours look like stone tools, and all of them completely dead. But Hunwoo was wrong about one thing. They were not dead. Far away, in a fortress made of living crystal that orbited a dying red star, something stirred. The Vorthok elder Kristani had been sleeping for 1,000 years, but the movement of the small human ship pulled her from her dreams. Her body was like a mountain of diamond, with faces that caught light and threw it back in strange patterns. She had been alive for 50,000 years, and she had seen this before. Another young race had found faster than light travel. Another species had started asking dangerous questions. Why were the stars so far apart? What lay beyond the next system? What wonders waited to be discovered? Kristani remembered when her own people had asked such questions. She remembered the great Vorthok fleets that had once filled the space between stars, building and exploring and dreaming of impossible things. She remembered what those dreams had cost them. Across the galaxy, in the burning heart of a pulsar, where matter danced at the speed of light, another consciousness took notice. Valthara was not made of crystal or flesh, but of pure energy held together by will. The Luminari had once painted auroras across entire star systems, just for the beauty of it. They had sung songs that made planets ring like bells. They had reached toward the center of the galaxy with hands made of starlight. Valthara felt the human ship like a discordant note in a perfect symphony. Their transmissions were chaotic, full of excitement and hope and terrible curiosity. The same qualities that had once driven the Luminari to greatness. The same qualities that had brought the shadow tide dot at the edge of the galaxy, where space grew thin and strange. Dark clouds rolled between the stars. They moved with purpose, consuming light and matter and possibility itself. The shadow tide had been growing for millions of years, fed by the dreams of ambitious species. It swept through systems where civilizations reached too far, too fast. It left behind only empty space and the lesson that some questions should never be asked. The surviving races had learned this lesson well. Better to sleep than to feed the darkness. Better to preserve what little remained than to risk everything for knowledge that might destroy them. On the New Soul, Minji Kim guided their ship between the silent structures. Each one told a story of incredible achievement. Here, a space elevator that reached from a planet's surface to its moon. There, a ring of mirrors that could focus a star's entire output into a single beam. Engineering marvels that showed intelligence far beyond human capability. "Why would they build all this and then just leave?" asked Engineering Officer Dong Yuk-yoon. "Look at this power grid. It's still intact. The whole system could come online tomorrow if someone just threw a switch." Hyunwoo was studying his instruments with growing excitement. The materials are incredible. Some of these alloys shouldn't even be possible. And this energy signature here, it's like they found a way to fold space itself. But where did they go? Minji wondered aloud. They did not go anywhere. In her crystal fortress, Christine watched the human ship through sensors that could peer across space and time. She saw their crude metal hull, their primitive fusion engines, their electronic signals that leaked information into space like blood in water. She saw their faces through their own cameras, young and eager and doomed. The humans thought they were explorers. They thought they were the first to ask these questions, to dream these dreams. They did not know that the galaxy was full of watchers, ancient beings who had made the choice between growth and survival long ago. Christine could contact them. She could warn them about the shadow tide, explain the price of ambition, but warnings had never worked before. Every young species believed they would be different, that they would succeed where others had failed. Perhaps it was better to let them learn for themselves. The lesson always came eventually. The darkness between the stars was patient and hungry, and it never forgot to collect what was owed. The new soul completed its survey and jumped to the next system, carrying its crew toward discoveries they could not imagine. Behind them, the empty structures continued their eternal watch, monuments to dreams that had burned too bright and paid the price. The alarm on the bridge of the new soul started beeping softly. Navigator Minji Kim looked up from her console with surprise. After weeks of silence, something was finally responding to their signals. "Captain Choi, we're getting a transmission," she called out. "It's coming from that structure ahead of us." "Captain Soyin," Choi moved to the center of the bridge. The structure they were approaching looked like a giant crystal flower floating in space. Its petals were made of something that sparkled with its own light. Unlike all the other alien buildings they had found, this one was clearly active. The ship's speakers crackled with static. Then a voice came through. It sounded like wind chimes mixed with the ringing of glass bells. The words were in perfect Korean, though something about the accent seemed ancient. "Unknown vessel, you trespass in monitored space. State your purpose and withdraw immediately." Soyin felt her heart begin to race. First contact, the moment every human had dreamed of since they first looked up at the stars. She stepped closer to the communication panel. "This is Captain Soyin Choi of the Earth vessel New Soul. We come in peace. We are explorers from the planet Earth, seeking knowledge and friendship among the stars." A long silence followed. Soyin could hear her own breathing in the quiet of the bridge. Finally, the voice spoke again, and this time it carried a weight of immense sadness. "Earth. So another young species has learned to travel between stars. You should not have come here, children of Earth. You should have stayed in your safe, small world." The main view screen flickered and came to life. What appeared on it made several crew members gasp. The being was tall as a building and made entirely of crystal. Its body had hundreds of flat surfaces that caught light and threw it back in patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it moved, the reflections created shapes that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could understand. "I am Christine of the Vorthok," the being said. "I have watched over this region of space for 20,000 of your years. In that time, I have seen 47 species discover faster than light travel. I have watched them spread across the galaxy with hope in their hearts and questions on their lips." Science Officer Hyun Woo Lee leaned forward. "Where are they now? The other species? We've found their cities, their machines, but no people." The crystal being's forms seemed to grow darker. Gone, all gone, consumed by their own ambitions. Minji Kim couldn't stay quiet. The young navigator had dreamed of this moment since she was a child. But why? Why would exploration be dangerous? There's so much to learn out here, so much beauty to discover. "Because it's there," she continued, her voice rising with excitement. "How can you not want to know what lies beyond the next star? What wonders exist in the far reaches of space? What's possible when different species work together?" Christine's crystal body pulsed with dim light. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of eons. "Your questions, young one, are the same ones my people asked 50,000 years ago. We too wanted to know what was possible. We built cities that floated between dimensions. We crafted tools that could reshape matter at the level of atoms. We reached toward the center of the galaxy with ships that could travel faster than thought itself? That sounds amazing, said Hyunwoo. Think of what we could accomplish together. With your technology and our ideas, we could solve mysteries that have puzzled us for generations. We could explore regions of space that are impossible to reach alone. The crystal being turned toward him, and her reflections created patterns, like fractured rainbows. That is exactly what my people thought, and what the Luminari thought before they retreated into their energy storms, and what the Kethmori believed before they sealed themselves into their hive worlds. But what happened to them? Soyan asked. The shadow tide came, Kristani said simply, at the edge of the galaxy, where space grows thin and reality becomes uncertain. There are storms of pure darkness. They feed on ambition, on the dreams of species that reach too far beyond their grasp. The more a civilization explores, the faster they expand, the stronger the shadow tide becomes. She paused, and the crew could hear the pain in her musical voice. It consumes entire star systems, Captain Choi. It turns matter back into nothingness, and possibility into void. 73 civilizations have been lost to it in the time I have kept watch. Engineer Dong Yukyun spoke up from his station. But surely there must be a way to fight it, to protect yourselves. Your technology is so advanced compared to ours. Technology means nothing against the shadow tide, Kristani replied. It grows stronger the more we achieve, the more we discover. The only protection is to stop discovering, to preserve what we have, and ask no more questions. Mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, young humans. Preservation is wisdom. Expansion is death. The communication began to fade as the new soul moved past the monitoring station. The last thing they heard was Kristani's voice, now barely a whisper. Go home, children of Earth, before it is too late. The bridge fell silent. They had found intelligence among the stars, but it was nothing like what they had hoped for. Instead of a vibrant community of explorers, they had discovered a galaxy of beings too afraid to dream. 6 months after the warning from Kristani, the research station Soul Base floated in the darkness around a planet that had no sun. The planet drifted alone through space, cold and lifeless, but the human station blazed with lights and activity. Inside the main laboratory, Dr. Taeyong Min stared at screens full of data that made no sense. The readings are getting stronger every day, he told the team gathered around the holographic display. But look at these patterns. The shadow tide isn't just random destruction. There's something planned about it, like it's thinking. Captain Soyan Choi walked between the floating images of dark energy storms. Each one showed swirling clouds of nothingness that consumed everything in their path. But Taeyong was right. The storms moved in patterns that seemed too organized to be natural. The Vorthok told us to go home, she said quietly. The Luminari sent us the same message. Even the Kethmori hive mind warned us to stop exploring. Every alien species we've met has been terrified of this shadow tide. And what did we do? Asked Dr. Jimin Park with a small smile. What humans always do, replied Engineer Dong Yoon from his workstation. We ignored the warning and decided to figure it out ourselves. That was exactly what they had done. Instead of returning to Earth, humanity had built research stations at the edge of known space. They sent robot probes into dangerous regions, where alien ships refused to go. Most controversial of all, they had asked for volunteers to actually fly into the shadow tide storms, to collect data from the inside. Captain, incoming message from the Pioneer's Dream, called Communications Officer Minji Kim. Her voice was excited. Commander Yoonji Kong is reporting back from the storm zone. The room fell silent. The Pioneer's Dream was a colony ship with 500 volunteers aboard. 3 days ago, They had flown directly into a shadow tide storm that was consuming a dead star system. Everyone expected them to be destroyed, but they had volunteered anyway. That was the human way, to risk everything for knowledge. "Put her through," Soyan ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of the colony ship. Commander Yunji Kong looked tired, but excited. Behind her, the crew was busy at their stations, very much alive. "Captain Choi, you're not going to believe this," Yunji said. "We not only survived the transit through the shadow tide, we came out stronger. Our fusion engines are running 30% more efficiently than before. And the samples we collected, the things we saw in there," she held up a small container that seemed to hold liquid starlight. "This material doesn't exist anywhere else in the galaxy. The shadow tide isn't just destroying matter, it's transforming it into something new." The laboratory erupted with excited voices as scientists began asking questions all at once. How was this possible? What did the energy readings mean? Could they use this new material to build better ships? But far across the galaxy, other beings were watching these impossible events with very different emotions. In her crystal fortress, Kristini felt the universe shift in ways that should not be possible. Her sensors, which had monitored space for 20,000 years, were showing readings that broke all known laws. The humans had entered a shadow tide storm and emerged not only alive, but improved. "This cannot be," she whispered to herself, her crystal form pulsing with confused light. 47 species have tried to fight the shadow tide. All of them were consumed. How can these primitive newcomers succeed where ancient civilizations failed? For the first time in centuries, Kristini felt something she had almost forgotten. Curiosity. What made the humans different? Why were they not following the same path to destruction that every other young species had walked? Even farther away, in the energy fields around a spinning pulsar, the luminary consciousness Velthara was experiencing something similar. For millions of years, Velthara had composed the same safe, simple energy patterns. Music that did not reach too high or dream too boldly. Songs that attracted no attention from the darkness at the galaxy's edge. But the chaotic transmissions from human ships were different. Their radio signals were wild and uncontrolled, full of laughter and arguments and ideas that made no sense. Their music jumped between impossible rhythms. Their conversations covered everything from quantum physics to what they wanted for dinner, without meaning to. Velthara began to copy some of these patterns. The Luminari found themselves creating energy sculptures that they had not attempted for the first time in ages. They felt the dangerous thrill of trying something new. In the deep hive worlds of the Kethmori, something even more unprecedented was happening. The collective consciousness that had thought as one mind for 1,000,000 years began to hear individual voices. Single Kethmori were asking questions that the group had forbidden long ago. What if the humans were right? What if the shadow tide was not an unstoppable force of destruction? What if running away and hiding was not the answer? These thoughts spread through the hive mind like a virus, causing confusion and excitement in equal measure. Some Kethmori wanted to crush these dangerous ideas immediately. Others wanted to explore them further, back on Sol Base. Dr. Taeyong Min was staring at the latest data from the Pioneer's dream, when he noticed something that made his heart race. "Captain," he called out, "you need to see this. The shadow tide storm that the Pioneer's dream flew through, it's not growing anymore. In fact, it's getting smaller." The room went quiet as everyone turned to look at the readings. For the first time in recorded history, a shadow tide storm was retreating instead of advancing. "How is that possible?" Soyan asked. Taeyong shook his head in wonder. "I don't know. But whatever we're doing, it's working." Dr. Yemen Park had been staring at the same data for 3 hours when the answer finally hit him. He stood up so fast from his workstation that his chair rolled backward into the wall. Around him, the Joint Research Station hummed with activity as beings from 4 different species worked together for the first time in millions of years. "I've got it," he announced to the laboratory. "I know what the shadow tide really is." The mixed group of researchers turned toward him. There was Threndel, a Vorthok scientist whose crystal body was smaller than the ancient Crystani, but just as beautiful. Velthera had sent part of itself as a glowing ball of energy that floated near the ceiling. 3 individual Kethmori drones sat at modified workstations, their insect-like bodies clicking with nervous excitement, and scattered throughout were a dozen human scientists who had volunteered for this impossible project. "The shadow tide isn't a punishment from the universe," Yemen said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "It's not some angry god that destroys civilizations for being too ambitious. It's an immune response." Dr. Yuna Shin, the team's best physicist, looked up from her calculations. "What do you mean? Think about it," Yuman continued. "Every species we've studied follows the same pattern. They explore, they build, they discover amazing things, and then they stop. They get scared and retreat into their safe spaces. They stop growing, stop changing, stop contributing anything new to the universe." The Vorthok crystal Threndel pulsed, with dim light, "But we preserve knowledge. We maintain our achievements. How is this wrong?" "Because the universe is built on change," Yemen replied. "Stars are born and die. Planets form and evolve. Life spreads and adapts. Everything in nature is always moving forward, always becoming something new. Except for advanced civilizations." He pulled up a holographic display, showing galactic energy patterns over millions of years. "Look at this. Every time a species retreats into isolation, the shadow tide gets a little stronger. Every time they stop exploring, stop creating, stop asking questions, the universe responds by trying to clear them away." The floating energy form of Velthera flickered with patterns of light that showed deep thought. "You suggest the cosmos itself requires growth. That stagnation is what triggers the destruction. Evolution, change, contribution," added Yuna, her eyes lighting up as she understood. "When civilizations stop pushing boundaries, stop creating new possibilities, the universe's own immune system activates to clear the deadwood and make room for something that will keep growing." One of the Kethmori drones, who had introduced herself as Ethera, made a sound like wind through leaves. "But we were told that ambition leads to the shadow tide, that reaching too far brings destruction." "That's what you were told," said Commander Sungmin Lim, who had been listening from the doorway. "But look at what actually happened. The shadow tide didn't come because you were too ambitious. It came because you stopped being ambitious." Threndel's crystal body began to resonate with sounds that none of the other researchers had ever heard. Before, the frequencies were complex and beautiful, like music played on an instrument made of starlight. Then our preservation, our careful maintenance of what we already know, has been feeding the very force you feared, Sungmin concluded. Every year you spent hiding, every discovery you refused to make, every question you stopped asking, made the shadow tide stronger. But it's not too late to change. The impact of this revelation spread through the research station like electricity. Within hours, messages were being sent to every corner of the galaxy. The truth about the shadow tide traveled faster than light itself, carried by quantum transmissions and energy patterns that the allied species had developed together. On the Vorthok crystal worlds, something began to happen that had not occurred in 50,000 years. Young crystals started growing in new shapes, experimenting with forms that their ancient creators had never imagined. They built structures that existed in multiple dimensions at once and sang harmonies that made space itself vibrate with new possibilities. In the energy storms where the Luminari lived, Valthara and others began composing symphonies that had not been heard since the early days of their civilization. These were not the safe, simple patterns they had maintained for eons, but wild, complex compositions that painted aurora across entire star systems and made dead planets ring like bells. The Kathmori experienced the most dramatic change of all. For the first time in a million years, their great hive minds began to split apart. Individual groups of drones formed new collectives, each one dedicated to exploring different paths of development. Some focused on biotechnology, others on quantum mechanics. Still others on forms of art that had never existed before. Dr. Hainijo was monitoring the cosmic phenomena from Sol Base when she noticed the first change. The shadow tide readings, which had been growing stronger for millions of years, began to fluctuate. Then, slowly but unmistakably, they started to decrease. "It's working," she whispered to her colleague Dr. Minsu Kong. "The storms are actually getting weaker." Over the following weeks, the changes became impossible to ignore. Dead star systems at the galaxy's edge, regions that had been consumed by the shadow tide eons ago, began showing signs of new life. Strange forms of matter that had never existed before started appearing in the cosmic void. Energy signatures that broke every known law of physics began painting new patterns across the darkness. "We didn't conquer the universe," Heian said one evening, as she watched a dead star suddenly flicker back to life. "We reminded it how to dream." Ambassador Jihano looked out through the transparent walls of the ceremony hall and still could not believe what he was seeing. The space station where they were gathered existed in both normal space and in dimensions that hurt his mind to think about. Parts of the walls seemed to fold into themselves, creating rooms that were bigger on the inside than the outside. Other sections glowed with energy patterns that the Luminari had woven into the very structure of reality. 1 year ago, the galaxy had been a collection of frightened, isolated species, hiding from their own shadows. Today, 43 different civilizations had come together to form something that had never existed before: the Stellar Synthesis Alliance. "Friends, colleagues, fellow dreamers," Jaehan began his speech, his voice carried to every corner of the station by technology that translated not just words, but emotions and concepts between species. "We gather today to celebrate not just survival, but renewal." In the audience, beings of crystal and energy and living metal listened with attention that would have been impossible just months before. Ancient Cristani sat next to young scientists whose bodies sparked with new geometric patterns. Luminary consciousness fragments danced through the air alongside human children who laughed at the pretty lights. Kathmori drones that had broken free from their hive minds chattered excitedly in groups of 3 and 4. 6 months ago, Jayan continued, the Luminary Consciousness Velthara composed a song that brought 3 dead stars back to life. The harmonies were so complex, so full of joy and possibility, that they awakened the fusion fires that had been cold for 1,000,000 years. Velthara's energy form pulsed with colors that had no names in human language. The being had become something new since breaking free from the safety of simple patterns. Its music now painted aurora across entire star systems and made planets sing in harmony with their suns. The Vorthok have grown crystal gardens that exist in 17 dimensions at the same time, Jaehyun went on. Their structures are so beautiful that looking at them teaches us new mathematics. Kristini's ancient form reflected the light from these impossible gardens, where once she had maintained only the old patterns. Now she grew new crystal formations. Every day, each one explored a different possibility of what matter could become when it was allowed to dream. The Kathmori have done something that was supposed to be impossible for their species, Jayan said with a smile. They have chosen individuality over collective safety. 10,000 separate research groups now explore different paths of knowledge, each one making discoveries that enrich all the others. Several Kathmori drones clicked their approval. They had discovered that thinking alone was not loneliness, but freedom. Each small group could move faster, try riskier experiments, and explore ideas that a massive hive mind would have rejected as too dangerous. In the front row, Captain Soyeon Choi watched her daughter check the final systems on her uniform. Lieutenant Minseo Choi was 25 years old, and had volunteered to captain humanity's first ship designed by the combined knowledge of 12 species. The Dawn's Promise waited in the station's dock, its hull made of Warthog crystal, its engines powered by luminary energy patterns, its navigation system guided by Kathmori computational networks. "And what of humanity?" asked Christine, her musical voice carrying easily across the hall. "What have the youngest members of our alliance contributed?" Dr. Su Yang Nam, the alliance's chief innovation officer, stood up to answer. She had been one of the first humans to work directly with alien scientists, and her research team had made discoveries that neither species could have achieved alone. "Humanity did what we have always done," she replied with a grin. "We asked the most important question in the universe: what's next?" The ceremony reached its climax as 3 ships prepared to launch from the station. Their destination was not another star system, or even another region of their galaxy, but the Magellanic Clouds, smaller galaxies that orbited their own. It would be the first time any known species had attempted to travel between galaxies. Each ship carried a mixed crew of volunteers from different species. They were not going as conquerors, or even as traditional explorers. They called themselves gardeners, ready to plant seeds of curiosity and growth wherever they found the darkness of stagnation. Minseo Choi took her position at the captain's chair of the Dawn's Promise. Around her, beings of crystal and energy and metal worked together at control stations that had been designed by minds that thought in completely different ways. The ship itself was a miracle of cooperation, powered by the collaborative dreams of species that had once been too afraid to even speak to each other. "All systems ready," reported the Vorthok navigation officer, her crystal form sparking with excitement. "Energy patterns stable and beautiful," added the luminary engineer, whose consciousness flowed through the ship's power systems like liquid music. "Course calculated and approved by all subcollectives," clicked the Kethmori communications. Specialist Minseo looked out at the galaxy they were leaving behind, where the shadow tide had once consumed light and hope. Waves of creative energy now swept between the stars. Dead systems were coming back to life. New forms of matter were appearing in the cosmic void. The universe itself seemed to pulse with renewed vitality. "Take us out," she ordered. The Dawn's Promise and its sister ships disappeared into the cosmic deep, carrying the light of curiosity to whatever darkness lay beyond. Behind them, the galaxy continued its renaissance, no longer waiting in shadows but finally ready to ignite the dawn.